Hey guys, hope everything is going well so far. My name's Andrew. I'm a junior comm student here. This is actually my fourth Bigler. I came here as a student, and third year I've been able to help out here. So, without further ado, I have the absolute pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker for the 25th anniversary of this conference, Alan Stout. He's the executive director at Visit Luzerne County. He's had a long and successful career in the areas of journalism and media. He began working with the Times Leader back in 1993 as a feature writer, a music columnist, and a newspapers and education manager. He was voted NEPA's favorite newspaper columnist 7 times and won a Keystone Press Award for excellence in journalism. Stout also hosts Music on the Menu on 105 and 103.5 The River, a local rock station. And then from 2001 to 2020, Stout served as the Community Resource Development Coordinator, the Director of Marketing Communications for Big Brothers Big Sisters of the Bridge Catholic Social Services of the Diocese of Scranton. He serves as an executive producer, writer, and narrator of Agnes, a highly successful and critically acclaimed documentary film which highlighted the Agnes flood in 1972 and its impact on the Wyoming Valley. The film premiered at a sold-out show at the FM Kirby Center a few blocks away in Wilkes. And in October 2025, Stout was inducted into the Luzerne County Arts and Entertainment Hall of Fame. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Alan and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Thank you, Wilkes University. Thank you, Dr. Churcher, and everybody that's here today. I went to that other school down the street. That's where I was a graduate of, the one with the big statue on top. But Wilkes has been a part of my family for a long time. My father is a graduate of Wilkes, and I've had so many family and friends that have gone to this great school. And mentioned the Agnes film. We actually showed that in this room a few years ago to the students at Wilkes. So I'm absolutely delighted to be here for all those reasons, and also because of the incredible man that this conference is named after. Tom Bigler is an absolute icon in local journalism, touching on so many different branches of media. He was a gentleman, and he understood the importance of journalism in a community. And so to be here as a keynote speaker, I was here not that long ago, just attending as a journalist myself, just coming to the workshops and mixing about the whole conference. And so to be up here today is an incredible honor. My name is Alan Stout, and I've pretty much touched on every single branch of journalism that you could imagine. I worked at the Times Leader for 18 years as a features writer, columnist, editor, copy editor, newspapers and education manager. I've been hosting a radio show for 22 years every week on 105 The River. I had a television show for a little while on SSP TV. And like a lot of people today, I've also gotten into podcasting, some of them that I do from home and some of them that I do at work with the Visitors Bureau. This is where it all began for me, on North Main Street in Wilkes-Barre at the Times Leader. And the opportunities that I received there over the course of the 18 years, and the way that I was able to move around the newsroom sometimes and take on this responsibility and take on this one, and get a couple of promotions over the years, of course. They are some of the most significant experiences of my life. And I lean on those experiences every single day in the career that I do now. Right now, I'm more on the other side of things. I work more in marketing and public relations. But the experience that I had as a member of the media, and that I still have in a certain way with the radio, has been absolutely invaluable to me in everything that I've done. My very first article that I wrote for the Times Leader, there it is, was published on, you always remember your first one, as they say, November 6, 1992. It was an article about a rock band called Bon Jovi. Anybody hear of Bon Jovi out there? I know that they've been around a long time. They were making records before you were all born. I had no idea when this story was published that day, and I was excited to see that byline in the newspaper for the first time. I had no idea what this was going to lead to, and that the journey that I have still been on to this day. When I was given an opportunity to be a freelance journalist for the Times Leader and cover music, I really tried to run with it. And the first part of my presentation today, I want to talk to you about seeing an opportunity and taking it. If somebody gives you a chance, even to do a little thing, you want to review this record and we're going to pay you $25. Sure, I would love to do that. And that's exactly what I did. I worked as a correspondent for only about 6 months before I got a full-time job in the newsroom. They had some openings in the newsroom. I applied for one of them. And the proverbial having your foot in the door. They knew me a little bit because I've been covering music for them for a couple of months. And so they saw what I could do to a certain level. Wasn't a great volume of work yet, but they had something. And that had definitely had an impact on my ability to land my first full-time job in the newsroom. But what did I do when I got into the newsroom? Did they say, hey, kid, go cover music full-time? That's why we hired you. Not at all. My first job was an editorial assistant. And I spent a lot of my time for 18 months, about a year and a half, doing community news briefs. People that were getting married, people that were having chicken dinners to raise money for a charity event, any kind of community news item where people were presenting checks and so forth and donations to charities. My job was to type that stuff in and make sure that it all fit the AP style and it was grammatically correct and get it ready to go into the newspaper. Because they knew me as prior to doing some music journalism, they kind of threw me a bone. And they said, and you could do this too. And so, but that wasn't my full-time job. My full-time job was to really help out with the Sunday wedding section and make sure that our community news pages were full of all sorts of community endeavors. And so it was something that was not glamorous. It was something that, was hard work. It was something that sometimes could be tedious. But I saw the opportunity. I had a goal. I had a desk in the Times Leader newsroom. I was helping put out the newspaper every day. I was one of the people responsible for making sure that something that was very important to them, their wedding announcement, was correct. Later, when I was still at that level, they asked me to do the obituaries one night a week to help out. Okay, I'll do it. Well, I had enough foresight at that early age to realize that this is important. Yeah, I'm a low man on the totem pole here in the newsroom. I'm over here in the corner at 10:30 at night getting death notices from funeral homes. But this is important. If I get this wrong, if I have that the viewing is Tuesday at 8 instead of Wednesday at 8, that's a major screw up for the family, right? And so I took those opportunities that I was given as a young man, and I appreciated I had a very cognizant of what I was doing and where I was. And eventually what happens if you do good work and you pay your dues, as they say, good things can happen to you. And after about a year and a half, I got promoted to be a full-time features writer. The arts and entertainment editor at the Times Leader asked me if I wanted to write a weekly music column. I began covering all of the concerts at the FM Kirby Center. We had a new amphitheater at Montage Mountain. They were bringing in some of the biggest acts in the world. My job was to cover all those. And all of a sudden, I'm doing what I wanted to do in the beginning when I was a correspondent. I am pretty much the Times Leader's full-time music guy. And that led to some of the most incredible experiences of my life. But what I did when I saw that opportunity, what you're going to experience in your life, all of you, is there's going to be someone that gives you that chance. And you will never forget them for the rest of your life. A gentleman named Paul Gallagher is the one that hired me to be a music correspondent. A woman named Mary Treese Beeble, still at the Times Leader. Iconic name in local journalism, Mary Treese. She's the one that hired me to come in and type up the weddings. A gentleman named Chris Ritchie was the features editor. He's the one that said, no more weddings or obituaries for you, kid. You're coming over here. You're on my team now. And he made me a features writer. Paul's the one that gave me my column, standing right in front of the building. Joe Buckowitz eventually became my boss and my editor. Did some of my favorite work that I've done in my whole career working for Joe. These people that give you these opportunities, you'll never forget them and you'll recognize them. And there are things that they will say to you when you are very young, right when you're coming out of college, that you will never forget. Joe Buckowitz always used to remind us that everything we do is for the reader. The reader, the reader, the reader. It's not about us, it's about them. And so sometimes when you are, becoming a columnist and so forth, and people are recognizing you out and about town, you realize that there's some responsibility that comes with that. And the ultimate responsibility is to those people. It's to those people that are coming up to you and saying, hey, I liked your column the other day, or I didn't like your column the other day. But just to engage with them and appreciate that that is why you were there. Some of the things that I did, though, when I was young, some of the people that I worked with probably didn't even know about them. One day, I took a day off from work, and when I look back on this now, I realize I probably didn't have to take the day off from work. I probably could have just asked my boss if I could do this on work time. But I was so young and still sort of so, unsure of what the protocol was in the newsroom for time off, that I actually used a personal day. And I didn't tell anybody what I was doing. And I went to New York City, and I visited all the major record labels. I went to Capitol Records and Warner Brothers Records and Columbia and Mercury and A&M and Virgin Records, and all the people that I was starting to get to know, because these are the people that were going to help me do my job better. The people that worked in New York and handled the bands and the labels were the people that were going to help me get the better interview. They were going to help me get the credentials for the events I wanted to cover. And so I realized that maybe swinging by and saying hello to them all someday would be a good idea. And that's what I did. And it was a remarkable day. It was an absolutely remarkable day. I remember being in the hallway of Mercury Records, and they sort of had their own Hall of Fame, where all the bands that were on their label were on these big, beautifully framed, lit up posters. And there was Bon Jovi, and there was Kiss, and there was Def Leppard, and the Scorpions, and Bryan Adams, and all these great artists of the time. And walking down this long hallway into the offices, and just exchanging business cards and saying, hey, I'm in town. I just wanted to say hello, put a name to the face. Taking an opportunity that I was given by the Times Leader to become a music journalist. I want to be the best music journalist. I want to get the best stories for our readers. I want to get the big interview. If somebody's coming into town that's going to play at the Kirby or at Montage, and they might do one interview for the market, I want to be the one that gets it. Why? The reader, the reader, the reader, because I enjoy reading it. And so I spent that day in New York, and I really wanted to cement our place as a newspaper as the one that was recognized in Northeastern Pennsylvania that was leading in arts and entertainment. Some of the advice that was given to me by those early mentors, I'll never forget. And this goes back to the reader as well, but also to the subject that you're writing about. When I was writing about local bands, I was only doing my column for about 6 months, maybe, a weekly column. And I realized that it was formulaic. I realized that it was starting to read the same way every week. It was just, the band was formed in this year, and this are their influences, and these are the guys in the band, and this is what they do, and this is how they go about trying to entertain people. And it's almost like I had a blueprint for the column. And I recognized that. So if I recognize that, then the reader was probably going to recognize that. And so I went to our features editor, Chris Ritchie, and I told him what I just told you. I told him, I feel like my column is sort of in a rut, And Colin was only 6 months old, which is not necessarily a good thing, right? And he said, well, what do you ask them when you talk to these musicians? What do you ask a band? I go, well, I ask them what town they're from, when they were formed, how they got together, who are their musical influences, you know, if they write their own music, how do they go about it, what's their inspiration for their songs, ask them about their live show, how do they try to connect with an audience. He said, well, they're really good questions. You know, that's good stuff to ask somebody. He goes, but do you ever ask them why? What do you mean why? Well, if they tell you that they were influenced by this group, do you ever ask them why? I'm like, no. He goes, ask them why. And then ask them why again. And then ask them why again. Very next week, I go out to do my column. I'm interviewing this band. They were called, I'll never forget it, they were called the Jersey Cartwrights. They were from Wilkes-Barre. And the guy said to me, I said, well, who are some of your influences? He goes, well, my biggest influence is the Beatles. A week earlier, my column would have read, influenced by the Beatles, the band was formed in. But I didn't do that. I said, why? Now, if you ask somebody why they like the Beatles back then, they're going to look like you're from Mars. Like, what do you mean? Everybody likes the Beatles. I'm like, no, I understand. I like them too. Why do you like them? Well, songwriting. They're master craftsmen at their art. You know, McCartney and Lennon. I'm like, yeah, I know, but why? What is it about everybody had a moment with them. He goes, well, I was 5 years old and my father took me to the drive-in to see the movie Help. And I knew right then that's what I wanted to do for a living. That was my lead on my story the next week. I was out of the formula. That's how the story began. Ever since John Cartwright was 5 years old and he saw the Beatles on the big screen, he knew what he wanted to do. I got that from just going a little bit deeper. It didn't take long. Literally took 30 more seconds. And I got so much more. So there's two lessons from that for those of you that go into journalism. If you're really trying to interview people, ask them why. And if you feel that if you're in a little bit of a rut or something earlier in your career, talk to your mentors, talk to your peers. Don't be shy about going up to your boss and saying, hey, what do you think about this? This is where I'm at. That advice Chris Ritchie gave me that day was the best journalism advice I ever received. I was probably only about 25 years old when he gave me that. Go with the flow when you are interviewing people. If you have those list of questions and something happens that takes you outside off your playlist, so to speak, roll with that. I was interviewing Billy Joel. Believe it or not, because he was coming here to Wilkes University. He was already an enormous star. But in 1996, he decided he was going to go do a small tour of college campuses, play a couple of songs, and do Q&As with students about the music business and songwriting. And so I knew he was coming into town. I'd already made that trip to New York and seen all the record labels. I mean, that trip to New York, I could tell you, I remember when I was at Virgin Records, and there was this big conference room with you could tell that the chairs and the table was very expensive. And I remember looking at that chair, at that room and saying, that's probably where the Rolling Stones just signed their new record deal, because they just signed an extension for 3 more albums with Virgin. So the memories of that day, seeing the Capitol Records logo up on the wall and knowing that was the Beatles label at one time. So all that paid off for me because I'm the one that gets Billy Joel on the phone when he comes to Wilkes-Barre. And we're talking for a little while. And I'm asking about the tour and why he's doing this unusual tour. You know, not making a lot of money doing these shows. This guy could play Madison Square Garden and make $1 million a night. And he talked about how he really wanted to give something back to students. But then he says to me, hold on a second. You hear that? And I hear a piano. I hear a piano off in the distance. And I said, yeah. What is that? He goes, that's my daughter. She's getting her piano lesson. And I said, who gives her the piano lesson? Because this is the piano man, right? This is like, one of the most famous musicians that ever played the piano in the world. He goes, I have a guy come to the house. I want to classically train. And so we both start laughing about how ironic it was. And so when I was going to write my article, I I broke one of the journalism rules that you can occasionally break if the moment fits. I was told earlier in my career, never start a story with a quote unless it is "I'm back," said Jesus Christ. If that was if that was the quote, you were allowed to run with it. But if it was anything else, you should probably not. And I only deviated from it a couple of times in my whole career, and that was the Billy Joel was one, because my story began with "Hold on one second," said Billy Joel, calling from his home in Long Island, holding up the receiver. You know, you hear a piano off in the distance, and I got into the story of the daughter getting the piano lesson. Chris Ritchie, who was the features editor at the time, told me, and he's the one that gave me the advice about asking why. That story ran over the weekend. I think it was on the front page of the Sunday paper. Monday morning, he said, "Alan," he goes, "I picked up he hadn't edited that story. It went through, it was a news story, so it didn't go through features. It went through the news desk. So he didn't even read it. And he said, "I picked up your story. I picked up the paper on my front porch on Sunday, and I read your lead, and I stood there and I read the entire article on the front porch because I'd sucked them in right from the first couple of sentences." So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to sometimes just go with the flow. If Billy Joel's letting you hear his daughter play piano, you know, there's a time in my career where I may have thought, okay, well, that doesn't fit what I want to talk to him about here. That's not about him coming to Wilkes. That's not about this tour that he's doing. No, I got all that in the story. That was all in there. It's just in there 2 or 3 paragraphs later. But let's roll with this. This is pretty wild. And so when you see these opportunities, you know, take the initiative. When I was at the Times Leader in 1997, we got purchased by Knight Ridder, which is one of the largest newspaper countries in the world. I was familiar with them because we subscribed to their syndicated services. So even in our newspapers, we would run Knight Ridder stories. And some of them were really good, the music ones. And so when that happened, as you would, any media, it's happening right now here in town with the TV station. It's going to happen. If you get into media and you're in for the long haul, your company's going to get purchased. You're going to go through a couple of sales. When I first started, we were owned by Cap Cities. Then we were owned by Disney. And then we were bought by Knight Ridder. And then the original owner came back and bought the paper. Rich Connor put a group together and bought it. I think we were owned by McClatchy for a little while. You lose track of them, how many there are. But the Knight Ridder one was a big deal because it was our first one since I was there from ABC. And my colleagues were nervous. What's going to happen? How's the new management going to be? Are we all going to keep our jobs? I didn't worry about it because there's nothing I could do. There's nothing I can do about it. This is where I work, and this is what I do, and the chips are going to fall where they may. So all I'm going to do every day is come in and put my head down and work hard. But I saw the opportunity. My first thought was actually really excited that we were going to be purchased by Knight Ridder, because I thought, can I now contribute to the Knight Ridder syndicated service? Until the very first thing that I did when the sale went through was I reached out to the entertainment editor of Knight Ridder Syndicated Services and introduced myself. I think I sent him a couple of music stories that I had written, that I published in the Times Leader, and I asked him if I could contribute. And he said, absolutely. You're part of the team now. That was enormous for me. Why? Because now if I'm asking a publicist for an interview with Eddie Van Halen or Aerosmith or AC/DC or somebody, I can tell them, not only will this be a feature story in the largest daily circulated newspaper in Luzerne County, but I could put it on the wire and it could go out to 800 newspapers and I could reach a couple of million people. Give me Steven Tyler on the phone for 20 minutes and we could potentially reach millions of people. Well, that worked. That worked. And as you could see, and so what happened was we really became known in with the record labels and even with the artists as a newspaper to come through. There's a funny story about this one. I'll show you. So that's a feature story that we did with David Bowie. We were the only we were the only newspaper in the market to get Bowie. That's Steven Tyler. It's a funny story about this one. So they had come to the market 3 times already. They loved Montage. They came to Montage every tour. And every single tour, I was getting somebody in the band to do the interview. I got Joe Perry, the guitarist twice, I got Brad Woodford, the bass player one time. And finally, they were coming back for like the 4th time. And their publicist was this woman named Luke, and she was British. And every time that I talked to her on the phone, she'd call me darling. She'd go, "Hello, darling, how are you today?" And so I kind of had a nice rapport with her. And I said to her, when Aerosmith was coming back, I sent her a request for an interview with Steven Tyler. And I basically told Luke, look, this band comes here every year. They're doing 14, 15, 16,000 people every show. This is the 3rd time. The people of this market deserve an interview with Steven. And I was funny about it. And I said, you can make it happen, Luke. You're the one. You have it. Come on, darling. Give us Steven Tyler. And she called me and she was laughing when she read my letter. She goes, Alan, I'm looking at your request here. You will get Steven, I promise. Well, we got Steven. And so building those relationships with people and knowing that sometimes you need to speak up for yourself and say, hey, don't give me the drummer again. Nothing against him, but how about getting us the big guy? And that interview was absolutely off the hook. If you want to listen to it, it's on YouTube. Just type in my name and Steven Tyler, and it'll pop right up. It's another one we got with Brian Johnson from AC/DC, John Bon Jovi. Again, I talked a lot about taking the opportunity. When I was given a radio show in 2004, it was a pretty pedestrian type show. It was a Sunday night show for an hour showcasing local bands. The reason that Entercom asked me to do that show, and that was Jim Rising, another person that I'll never forget, because he gave me a chance. When he asked me to do the show, I was thrilled. And we were doing the show. I was on for maybe about 1.5 years. And I asked Jim if we could do something that might be a little bit different. And I said, could we maybe do some live broadcasts with local bands on a commercial radio station? Unheard of. Unheard of. And my idea was to do something on the 20th anniversary of the death of John Lennon. And my idea was, let's take all of our great local bands and put them together at one of our best venues. We did it at the Jazz Cafe. And have them all play some John Lennon songs. Let's all work together so that we don't have people repeating the same song in the set. And so one band's gonna do In My Life, somebody else is gonna do Norwegian Wood, someone else is gonna do Imagine, someone else is gonna do Starting Over. But let's broadcast the whole thing live on the radio. What do I have to lose to ask? The worst he could say is no. He loved the idea. And it was absolutely one of the coolest events I was ever a part of in my life, to have all these great musicians, local musicians, paying tribute to John Lennon on the anniversary of his passing. And we donated all the money to the John Lennon Scholarship Fund. So it actually went right to Yoko Ono. So she even knew what we were doing. And that led to me going, all right, Jim did one of them. Let me see. Jim, did you like doing that John Lennon thing that we did at the Jazz Cafe? Oh yeah, well, that was great. It was a great idea. Thanks for, well, would you like to do one every month? Now I'm really pushing it, right? Because now I want him to give up an hour of commercial radio time for local bands and put them live on the radio, not doing John Lennon songs, but doing their own music. Jim said, sure, let's do it. And we did that for years. I think we did that for about 10 years. We had local bands doing their own original music live on the radio on a commercial radio station once a month. And the exposure that it gave them and the way they were able to build their audience and share their artwork and their art and their craft was, I honestly believe that we were the only commercial radio station in the United States there was ever doing anything like that. And so if you have an idea when you are getting off into your careers and you're settled in a little bit, maybe you got a little bit of a repertoire that you could, you got a little bit of a resume, and you pitch an idea that sounds crazy, you just never know. The person that could make the decision might say, yeah, let's do it. And I try to do that now with the team that I supervise at the Visitors Bureau. They came up to me a few months ago and they wanted to try something very different for our Visitors Guide that we've never done before. And I knew they were qualified to do it. I knew they had this talent and the skill to do it. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so it's going to be an illustrated cover for the first time, drawn by Kyle from our staff. He did all the artwork itself. And it'll be out any day now. And so I try, when I go through my career, to think about the people in my life that said yes to me and try to pay that forward to people now that are asking me those questions. Another thing that I learned in journalism is that you're always working. And if you are passionate about journalism, you're glad to always be working. When you get out of your car to go on an assignment, you are working. I learned this from one of my coworkers, Mark Jones. Mark Jones was a feature writer at the Times Leader, and he was the same age as me. But he started about a year and a half before me. So he had done more stories than me. He was more experienced than I was. And I loved Mark's stories. I thought he was a wonderful writer. And he wrote this story once. He interviewed a couple of popular DJs from the radio station, Rock 107. They were really popular, Daniels and Webster. They were funny guys. And they were kind of local icons when it came to morning radio. And Mark went up to do a profile on them. And his lead on his story began with some of the things that he saw in their office hanging on the walls, quirky things and odd bumper stickers. And he kind of painted a picture of what it was like to just walk in when you're going to go and sit down with these guys. And I realized that I wouldn't have done that at that age. I would have showed up at the front desk and I would have said, yes, I'm here to see Mr. Daniels and Mr. Webster. I'm from the Times Leader. And somebody probably would have walked me back to them and I would have sat down and waited for them. And I learned from Mark, that's not what you do. As soon as you show up on site, start looking. Start looking around. What can I use in the story? How can I paint the picture? It could be the weather. It could be the decorations. It could be the smell. But one of the most important things in journalism that I also learned from those early mentors of mine is show, don't tell. Show, don't tell. I heard that all the time from people like Joe Buckowitz and Chris Ritchie. Now, how are you going to do that on a black and white newspaper print, or today on a cell phone when you're scrolling online? With words. Describe things. Paint the picture. Show, don't tell. If you get into video journalism, go out. Nobody wants to see someone standing there talking about something that's going on. Go out. You want it behind you. You go out to the scene. And so I learned from Mark, though, with the written side of journalism, in the print side, you could still show and not only tell. So I learned from Mark to describe things. I learned from Chris, ask more, ask why. All these things, I was like a sponge. I was taking it all in, trying to make my stories really pop off the page and have people enjoy them. And one of the greatest things that people said to me during all the years I covered concerts, and I got this quite a bit over the years, was I wasn't at the show, but I read your review and I felt like I was there. That, because describing music on paper is hard, but you can still paint the picture. You can use all the right adjectives. You can use all the right descriptions, but you can also, I'm talking about sonically, you could describe the sound with the mix and the clarity and the instrumentation. Was the band tight? Were they not? Were they sloppy? All that stuff. But did they connect with their audience? Did the people that came to see them get what they wanted? It's not about you. It's about the reader, the reader, the reader. I covered lots of concerts by artists that I didn't own one of their records and I never listened to. but it was my job to go there. And all I cared about was, did the people that paid to come here get what they wanted? Did they connect with their audience? 90% of the time they do, because there's a reason that they're playing Montage or the Arena or at the Kirby Center. They didn't fall onto that stage overnight. But once in a while, I could see someone was mailing it in. They played 100 miles an hour. They didn't even say hello to their fans. They didn't know what town they were in. And it felt kind of sterile. And I would write that. Show, don't tell. You're always working. The biggest story that I ever got from the news side of things involved music. And it involved the Montage Amphitheater at Harvey's Lake and the Montage Amphitheater, the Harvey's Lake Bud Light Amphitheater and the amphitheater at Montage. There was a partnership for a little while between a local promoter and the big Metropolitan Entertainment Group that brought shows to Montage. They opened up an amphitheater at Montage Mountain. Anybody ski up at Montage? Have you ever been up there? Okay. This amphitheater was right at the ski lodge. Where you come down the hill was actually where people sat and watched the shows, and they would build this enormous stage every summer and put it right on the bottom of the slope. And it was exciting for Northeastern Pennsylvania because we never had a venue that could hold 18,000 people before. And so for the first time ever, we are now getting the biggest bands of the time, Rod Stewart or Van Halen or Aerosmith, up and coming bands. And Britney Spears was there, I remember, when she was brand new. And so it was exciting for all of us, especially for me, because my job is to go cover all the shows. So I love the fact that this was happening. But if you've been up there, you know that place is not meant to have 17,000 people there at a time. If you go up there skiing, there's probably a couple of hundred tops, right, at any given time. And so they had all sorts of problems. And they brought in this big tour in 1997. It was the biggest concert tour of the year. It was called the Lilith Fair. It was a documentary film that they made about this tour, how groundbreaking it was. It was all female artists at the time. Sarah McLachlan, Sheryl Crow, I was on the bill, the Indigo Girls, Lisa Loeb, Melissa Etheridge. And they went out and they put on this incredible tour showcasing talent of female songwriters. And it was over the top of Montage. They had the biggest crowd ever. It was over 17,000 people. And there was a lot of stuff going on at the time about a lot of chit chat about how they're going to handle this crowd. My editor actually asked me, how do you get up there to cover these shows? How do you get out of there? And I said, well, I know a shortcut. I said, I actually get off the music exit and I cut through Glenmora, and that way I come up above the baseball stadium, so I miss all the baseball crowd, and I'm already up the mountain. And I regretted saying that as soon as I said it. She said, well, we got to publish that. We got to let people know that there's another way to get up there. I'm like, no, don't tell my secret. That's how I avoid the traffic. But of course, we had to do that. And so we wrote a little sidebar to our pre-show about alternate routes to get up to Montage. Well, guess what? Coming out of there at 11 o'clock at night, it didn't do any good. And there were people that were stuck there until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to get out of the parking lot. And so it was a concert that had stuck in people's mind for a while. Flash ahead, 4 months later, like I said, you're always working. I went over to my favorite bar on a Saturday night to have a couple of drinks. And one of the promoters that used to be involved with this group, he said, hey, and by the way, that bar is now my office. It was the bar that I used to hang out at every Saturday night. The county now has the Visitors Bureau there. So I'm glad that the walls don't talk. But he says to me, hey, I got a tip for you. We're literally sitting at the bar. He goes, what? I go, what's up? He goes, the Lackawanna County Commissioners, they're going to cancel the contract with Metropolitan. They don't want the concerts anymore. And I said, why? Because of Lilith Fair? And he goes, well, yeah, Lilith Fair and everything else. I mean, it's taking people forever to get out of there. They feel it's a safety issue. I said, all right. So I hung out for the rest of the night and, watched the band, had a beer or two, and when I was walking out of the bar, I said to this gentleman, I said, Tom, if what you told me is, I'm going to check out what you just told me. And if what you told me is true, that's going to be on the front page of the paper on Tuesday. He goes, you go ahead, check it out. So I did, and it was all true. I called the commissioners in Scranton. I called the guys that ran the amphitheater. Yeah, they were definitely at an impasse. They had it with each other, basically. More so the commissioners. They loved having the concerts here. They thought it was great for the community, but they were hearing the complaints, and they were literally concerned that 17,000 people coming down a one-lane road at 11 o'clock at night wasn't working too well. And so I break this story. We're the first people to have it, and that's a great feeling when you're in journalism. And I know Bill Boyle from the Times Leader is here, and he could tell you, Bill, when you're driving into work in the morning and you're listening to WILK radio, and they're saying the Times Leader was reporting today that fill in the blank, and it was your story, that get you some juice. And so I had that story, and I wound up covering this story for the next year and a half because it went on. Liability complaints, Ron talked about Mountain Agenda. So now the commissioners are starting to tell their side of the story. They are telling people, this is why we don't want the concerts. We're worried about liability, we're worried about complaints, we're worried about safety. And then all of a sudden the radio stations get involved. KRZ and Rock 107 and Hot 97, and they're saying, we need to save the concerts. And they're having all these petition drives. So I gotta write about that. And then the commissioners say, I don't care about your petitions. Tell us what you want us to do about it. We understand you like the concerts, but that's not solving the problem. Okay, now I got to write about that. And so I'm no longer the features writer. Now I'm on page 1 every day. In the middle of all that, I still have my column. And so I decide right in the middle of all this that I can step out from being a reporter and editorialize. And I can only do this on my column. I could not have done this in the news section. There is a difference. There's a difference between when I was able to flip that switch like that. And I think a lot of the reporters out there could probably do this. I knew when I just had to quote people accurately and get the story. And then in my column is where I could say, well, this is what I think about all this. And I wrote this column, and I was very fair to everybody. I had at that point been talking to the commissioners. I had been talking to the people that ran the amphitheater. I knew how they both felt. I didn't think that either of them had anything malicious intent. You know, maybe the guys that built the amphitheater got in over their head a little bit with this spot, and maybe it isn't the best spot. Maybe we should look at moving it somewhere else. But we're getting great crowds here, and we love being in Scranton Wilkes-Barre. So that was positive, right? They're open to some suggestions, and they love being here. And the commissioner's like, look, we're not. This isn't like the Burgermeister in Santa Claus is coming to town. No more concerts for you. You know, it was. Look, this is a problem. It's not a well-run facility. So I basically write a column about it, and I basically say, you know, try to understand where everybody is coming from. And I even had a little bit of fun with it. My column was called Music on the Menu. And as you can see, for that week, we called it Music Not on the Menu because we weren't sure if the concerts were coming back or not at that point. So I was able to switch gears for that story. And I think actually that this helped build my relationship with both the commissioners and the promoters because they understood that I was going to treat them both fairly, which I did for the next year as the story continued to develop. At one point, they were having a press conference up at the Lackawanna County Commissioner's office in Scranton, and I went up to cover it, and I hit some terrible traffic on 81, and I was literally stuck, and I was frustrated because I knew that the press conference was starting at 10, and here I was, 5 miles away, not moving. And when I got there, they walked in. Oh, they waited for me. They didn't start the press conference until I got there because I think that they knew that I was the one that was covering the story maybe the most thoroughly and the most fairly. And so that's an example of where you can sometimes editorialize in the middle of doing news coverage, just make sure you do it in the right lane. And I decided to do that in my own weekly column. Then I was back to news. And again, just like that, flip the switch. Talks could revive months. Now they're talking. Now they're getting some ideas together. Maybe we could do this. Maybe if you do this and we do that, we could work this out. Radio petitions draw static from officials. So Rocky and Sue from KRZ-FM went up to give them all these petitions, hundreds and thousands of people that signed up to music concerts, and the commissioners didn't show up. They weren't there. So you see them standing there in front of nobody. And so now I'm writing a story about that. And they're saying, we didn't know they were coming. We're sorry. It's not like we don't care about the people. And so it's going on and on and on. And then something really funny happens. The rock group Yes announces their summer tour with a Montage concert date on it, even though this issue has not been resolved between Montage and the commissioners. And I see that go over the wire, and I say to my boss, hey, check this out. They've got a concert at Montage up here. Got to do a story about that. So we even had some fun with the headline. Is it a yes or a maybe at Montage? Then another group, Backstreet Boys. They have a Montage concert date coming out. Again, we haven't heard anything official that they're coming back. And so I'm writing about that. And then finally it gets resolved. And they say this is what we're going to do. And they tell them that they're going to give them another year. And they're going to keep talking about working some things out. And so I'm back to doing my thing, and I'm going to be covering concerts again at Montage in 1998. And so we're back to business. We're talking about it. They're having these negotiations. The bands play on. Montage concert, Praise is invited, so forth. Goes on. They're going to come back in 99. They're coming back in 99. And then they come to the big agreement, and that is that not only are we going to stay, we're going to build a new amphitheater. It's going to be better. We're going to put a covered roof on. We're going to have 6,500 seats. It's going to have a beautiful courtyard. We're going to put a third lane going up the mountain, and we're going to put a new exit off 81, exit 51 to make it easier for everybody. So I'm up there walking around doing those stories, and I ruined my shoes that day. I remember that because I did not know I was going to be walking around in the mud with these guys when I went up to interview them. And in spring of 2020, we have our beautiful amphitheater that we have today. And I was back to business, and I was covering concerts at Montage again, and interviewing bands, and doing what I love to do. You are always working. You are always working. I would not have had that story if I wasn't having beer at a bar with a promoter who gave me the tip. And I honestly do believe that because we played it on Page One and we treated it as such a big story, that is why it became the event that it was. That's what led to the radio petitions. We didn't just tuck this thing on Page 3 as a little, hey, the controversy. If you put it on Page 1 above the fold, it gets everybody's attention. And that story did get everybody's attention. And in some ways, I like to think that it helped save the concerts at Montage. So if you ever go up there to see a show, you could possibly be a little bit grateful that I was drinking beer at Market Street Square one night in 1997. You're always working. Take the tip wherever you can get it. I was home one night. Things popped up on my phone. Michael Jackson cardiac arrest. 5 minutes later, pops up TMZ reporting Michael Jackson dies. I called my editor. I say, hey, you see this? He goes, yeah. He goes, come in. I wound up getting into the story, rushing back to the paper, turning a page story about it. We actually interviewed 3 people that night who had local ties to northeastern Pennsylvania, who all had some encounters with Michael Jackson. The flooding in 2011, when the valley almost flooded, we had a 43-foot crest of the Susquehanna River. I'm working. I'm not going home. I called the editor. Hey, I live up on a big hill. My house is out of the flood zone. I could write some stories if you want. Absolutely. Over to Westside Tech, over to State Street School, evacuation centers, Red Cross, everything. You know, you want to do this if you're a journalist. The war in Iraq, the night that when it broke out in 2003, the Columbia explosion, working. I wasn't working. I was home. Phone rings, copy desk. Hey, can you come in? It's gonna be a crazy night. Absolutely. I come in and I'm helping put out the stories the next day because I wanted to be there. These are significant events that are happening. We're at war. We've just lost astronauts. I always felt, in the flooding, for example, I felt, first of all, I did live out of the floodplain, and not all my coworkers did. So if someone could go home and get their stuff out of their house and get to higher ground, and I could write a story not knowing that my house is fine, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to help out? Why would I want to be a team player? Another story about how you're always working and taking notice of things as soon as you walked into the room was a concert that I covered at the Kirby Center. Anybody ever heard of Aretha Franklin? Have you heard of Aretha Franklin? The Queen of Soul? One of the greatest artists of all time. She was at the Kirby, and I'm covering the show, and I go over to the soundboard, and I see her set list. And on her set list, in the middle of all her songs, is Fake Exit. I have no idea what that is. Is that the name of one of her songs? I've never heard of Fake Exit. Was that a hit? I missed that one. I don't know what it means. And so I'm there and I'm covering the show, and she's doing all the big hits and all that stuff, Respect and all that stuff. And right there on that moment on the set list, she has a tantrum and talks about how the air conditioning in the building is not to her satisfaction, and I cannot perform like this. And she loved being a diva. She played it up. That was part of her thing. And so you're just kind of sitting there like, it's just Aretha being Aretha. Well, she actually walked off stage and came back 5 minutes later saying that the issue has been resolved and that they'd fixed it, and continued the show. And I'm thinking, and I'm sitting there, I'm the only one in the theater that has this Fake Exit on my lap on my notebook. And I realized she just wanted a break. She probably needed a break in the show. She knew she needed to get off stage for a couple minutes and maybe sit down for a little. She's getting a little older at that point. But what she did was she threw our beautiful FM Kirby Center under the bus, right? And I didn't like that. That's my town. What are you doing, girl? And so I put it in my review. That, this little tantrum that she had may or may not have been legitimate, because at that point on her set list, she had written down Fake Exit. Well, the executive director of the FM Kirby Center called me and thanked me. She said, thank you for doing that, because there was nothing wrong with the air conditioner that night. It was working absolutely fine. I'll just leave you with a couple of things. You will have some responsibilities in your life as a journalist. I got into doing some things with charity. I did a concert for many years because I was able to do it. Teamwork. Always recognize the people that help you with your projects. This is a quote that I have in my office. It's attributed to three different people: Mark Twain, Harry Truman, and Ronald Reagan. And it basically says, you would be surprised what you could do you would be amazed at the great things you could do if no one cares who gets the credit. And I honestly believe that is how you should go about all the projects that you work on. Recognize that the newspaper, if it comes out, that is everybody, from the guy that drives the truck in the morning and delivers it or the person that puts it online, everybody is a part of that wheel that produces that product. And I always went out of my way to recognize people that were a part of whatever success that I had. As far as the future goes, I know that Judy from VIA talked to you a little bit about AI earlier. All I can tell you is this: it's going at 100 miles an hour. There's stuff that a year ago it was a big deal, right? That there was this song on the radio that was made by AI. A year ago, that was like the big buzz. Now you can do one. Now you can talk into your phone and have your own song. You could be in a music video playing at Madison Square Garden. They'll make it's going so fast. And so if you're getting into any career right now, it's a little scary. Are they going to need me in 5 years, right? Are we all thinking that, right? My daughter's in college. I'm having these conversations with her. When it comes to journalism, there are some things that AI is never going to be able to do. If you go and you cover a fire, there's a building burning down, and you're the reporter on that night. First thing you're going to do is you're going to see, was the family all out? And if they're all out, you're going to talk to the family. Are you okay? Is everybody? You got that? Families, 3 people were inside, all safe. Where's the fire chief? He's over there. Chief, have how many people were here? How long did it take you to get here? You know, what kind of damage estimate? Is this house savable? Got your stuff from the chief. Oh, the mayor showed up. Sometimes the mayor shows up, there's a fire. Mayor, get the comments. Mayor's gonna maybe compliment the crew who got the fire put out and stuff like that. That takes 15 minutes. You just talked to 3 people. You knew the nuances. You knew when to be sensitive to people. You knew when to maybe he's not ready to talk about that. I'll go talk to him. AI is never going to be able to do that. It's never going to be able to go out there and figure out how to handle a scene. And who should I talk to? And how should I go about it? And what tone should I use? And literally just be on the ground. So I would say to you, just always remember that there will be a place for journalism. All this stuff about fake news, I see it. I'm at the gym. I could see the different televisions. I could see Fox has the same headline, a different headline than MSNBC. But there are so many news agencies. And none of those are fake news anyway. They're just putting in the way that they want to do it. You know, some of the stuff they're saying is legitimate, but there will always be a need for great journalism. People like Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who broke the Watergate, they are legendary journalists. Some of my colleagues at the Times Leader who broke the Kids for Cash story and changed the footprint of Luzerne County judiciary system with their journalism. There are lots and lots of great journalism people out there that want to get the truth, that want to get it right, that want to be accurate. Don't ever think that it is a career that does not have value or merit or great integrity. There is something beautiful about going out and covering news accurately and providing that to your community. And so I get very frustrated when I hear that term being overused to the extent that it could taint great journalism in every way. I want all of you guys to go out there and have great careers in journalism. And if you ever bump into me out and about a couple years down the road, come up to me, tell me about it. I want to be proud of you. And I want somebody like the great Tom Bigler to be proud of you too. Thank you very much.